I think the people that I get to work with day in, day out, the culture from the top down. We're a God-fearing, God-honoring company. He has blessed us, and to work in a place like that day in, day out is truly, I think, an exception in our country. I wish we had more places like that.
Let's call this meeting to order and turn it over to City Manager to go through this agenda.
Thank you, sir. We'll begin with the minutes of your regular held last week, which happened to be the last week of September, which by extension happened to be the last week of the 2011-2012 fiscal year. We are in a new year today. Comments, questions, changes?
No.
Item number 2. Mr. Shaw has joined us. Ordinance 7368. First reading on an ordinance changing the zoning of a little over 11.5-acre tract out in the vicinity of Swansea and Carter. Changes from Ag District to general retail. I believe you have a map attached to the last page right before tab 3. Kelly?
This is associated with the annexation that you saw recently. This is for the development of a United supermarket and some other retail out parcels. Currently zoned agricultural, and basically what they're requesting is the appropriate zoning to have their retail uses. What's a little different about this request is they are requesting general retail, which everything that they're proposing to do, or basically everything that we think would be appropriate along this corridor, would be allowed in. However, if you look up and down Swansea, especially on the west side of Swansea, what you're mostly going to see are planned developments. And a lot of those were done some time ago. Ruby Tequila's is a planned development. It's just a restaurant. There are several planned developments on the west side of Swansea. Staff, when we discussed with the property owner whether it was going to have to be a planned development or whether we would recommend planned development or general retail zoning, we said general retail zoning, and the reason being that we have almost 400 planned developments today. Planned developments are usually, those zoning tools that are used for unique top developments or developments that have multiple uses and that don't fit neatly into one category or another. However, it's been kind of past practice of the planning department to do planned developments along Swansea, not knowing what was going to happen west of there. Normally, some other places, it's the opposite. It's if one use is there before another use, whoever goes in behind it has fair warning what it is. But at that time, it was felt that planned developments were better to use in order to protect the future uses from any negative impacts it might have on. Basically, all the PDs were done for signage and so forth. So we felt, or it's our staff's opinion, that if you don't like your development standards that are associated with the zoning that's appropriate for that area, then you need to change your development standards that are associated with that zoning. If you keep doing planned developments, it's very difficult to figure out which development standards apply to which place. Every single PD out there basically has a different sign standard, different landscaping standard, everything else. So we suggested straight general retail zoning. So that's what the request is for. That's what we recommended. They agreed. Everything that they're wanting to do will fit neatly within the general retail zoning. It's appropriate with other retail uses along that corridor. Generally, we don't like to see strip retail developments. Loop 335 is one of those corridors that is more conducive to non-residential development than residential development. It's one of the backbone major thoroughfares of the city. So we think that type of development is appropriate. Planning and zoning commissioners felt that the zoning request was appropriate as well. However, we did have one property owner show up who's the owner of the furniture store directly to the south. Said he wasn't against the development, but he was concerned that it was not a planned development, and he was concerned that how it would develop would affect in a negative way the integrity of the investment that he's made and maybe some other property owners. It's certainly a valid point, but for all the reasons that I just mentioned, plus we've amended our sign regulations. They're much more appropriate than they used to be. You know, back in the day, you could have a 900 square foot sign and have as many of them as you wanted. Today, along that corridor, what would be allowed is one freestanding sign up to 300 feet and 30 feet high. We also have improved or amended our landscaping ordinances to require bigger trees. And so we think there have been some changes along the line that would help protect that integrity of some of the extra standards that were applied to those properties. And once hearing that, he said, well, I do feel a lot better about that now. So, but he was concerned about, you know, getting away from the planned developments. Planning and zoning commissioners felt still the appropriate zoning was general retail and recommended approval of it unanimously.
I encourage you to keep going that direction. I think it's a much better way to manage and not micromanage every detail with the developer that's trying to deal with particular things they bought that land for. So I think it's great. I think it's really well done.
You don't think they should maybe call this property be used for general retail uses, perhaps?
Certain phrases have been stricken for our future documents.
Or uses allowed within general retail.
Well, but there's some, I think the difficulty for me always was there's some planned districts that have very, very, very specific rules that micro into the development way beyond what somebody needs to.
Well, I know there's, when I used to work for the city of Wiley, the city next door, they had almost 700 planned developments. And they literally said, the city initiated a complete zoning change where they went in and rezoned every single planned development because it was unenforceable. Yeah, because nobody knew what standards applied to what property.
Let me get the book, and we'll go out and look at this one property.
All right, and we've got 400. So
I encourage you to keep going this direction.
Thank you. We appreciate that support. That was something also identified in the comprehensive planning process that PD certainly had a use, but they shouldn't in and of themselves become a de facto zoning district.
They've been overused. And then the default.
Mayor, Commissioner, questions?
No.
Thank
It's
you.
falling in place.
Do you have any idea, have they given you any indication of how much other development besides the United would be in there or anything?
The last site plan that I saw had 4 out parcels in front of it.
Good.
Good work, Joe.
Item number 3, resolution municipal garage and drainage facilities project reimbursement authorization. Standard reimbursement resolution done by the city. This one resolution accommodates both of the issuances that were discussed during your 2012-2013 budget, that being the short-term financing for the long-life capital equipment at the garage and for your municipal drainage projects. Questions or comments? This will start that process, but it also authorizes you to do the project award we contemplate later today on the consent agenda. Item number 4, resolution approving the amended bylaws of the Amarillo Health Facilities Corporation. Recall, this is a corporation that's been largely inactive in recent years. A few weeks ago, you brought that board back up to full strength. We expect them to get going. They do have some amended bylaws that were done the last time they had gotten together. And you can see those. Dean and his crew have those marked in the red line version. They are administrative in nature, and we would request your consideration and approval. Any hard questions would be gratefully answered by Mr. Frigo. Because I don't remember that far back.
Well, and we're going to meet tomorrow at noon.
Well, I'm glad we're cleaning up some of the language, making it easier to conduct business.
I do not always have mastery of the English language. So.
Is that the one for each director?
Notice of each special shall be given by the secretary to each director, in writing stating the time.
So in writing, it should not be a comment.
Commissioner, if you want to comment, we'll put a comment. That's just not worth it. We'll fall on the sword for it.
Comments are on secretary.
That's right.
And I encourage a comment.
Well, I do want to have input back on policy.
Vowels are expensive, comments are cheap.
If you're comfortable, rather than trying to do an amendment, if you'll just trust us, if y'all approve this resolution, and we do the clean copy of the comment in there, it's kind of a type of more than something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Punctuation is important.
Questions or comments on the amended bylaws?
Really, the only thing substantive in here was that they were originally at regular meetings and we've never been a need for that. So that's
Not a long time.
the biggest focus.
Yeah, they'll be meeting.
These types of bonds were much more active and more common years ago, and that's just a tool. It's not being used much anymore. How many are out there, Dean, that are still open?
Oh, they used to do them for a lot of doctor offices. We did tons of them. But those are largely paid off by now. And then the changes in law made it to where you couldn't do that. But like the last issue was a Baptist St. Anthony's issue. We used to have tons of small ones.
Maybe even more than industrial revenue.
Yeah, I think so. We had a lot of them.
Another blast from the past.
I was there.
Were you on industrial revenue?
I was on the Texas Industrial Commission that passed the laws, the rules,
Oh.
for issuing those bonds.
Well, we did quite a few of those along I-40 also.
Seemed like the very first one was Guy and Saunders building there on Grand. The office building that was the insurance. That was the first one.
Corporate systems, yeah.
Corporate systems.
That whole corridor in front of us and all the way down was.
Industrial revenue.
Excuse me.
Item number 5, public hearing, proposed annexation. This is just under 2.5 acre tract. This is Marion Place, Crestwood Lane. This is a request, but a voluntary annexation. This is not the city doing this. This is the property owner requesting such. Kelly?
That's correct. This is what we would call a property owner sparsely populated, property owner initiated sparsely populated annexation request. And because of that, we can follow a much shorter time frame for the approval process. Basically, it runs through the same approval process other than the first and second public hearings that are required with your other, what we would call city-initiated annexations. This will probably take 60 days and still about 4 to 5 months that a normal annexation request would take. However, the purpose for this is this annexation request is associated with property development out in the La Paloma area. This particular area has been platted. From the very beginning, we had multiple versions of lot configurations on the north side. If you look at your sketch on the north side of the right-of-way there, this Unit 9 is a new plat. And given there are issues involved in this area with the drainage easement, the 60-foot drainage easement, property ownership. So once we finally decided on what the lot configuration was going to be, we knew that annexation was going to happen. We agreed to go ahead and approve the plat because they were so far along in some of their other design work and everything, with the stipulation of them knowing that these portions of lots that had been approved would not be provided water, city services until they were brought into the city limits. So that was kind of the agreement that we worked out with the property owner. So this is just following up on that, annexing those portions of the lots that were platted to get all of the lots that are going to be provided service inside the city limits. This abbreviated process also doesn't require a service plan at this point in time. However, by the time the first reading of the ordinance, a service plan will be prepared. However, we have sent out comments, and there is no problem with any city services. The water line's already in place, sewer line's already available. So this is just cleaning up some areas within a plat that needs to be brought within the city limits.
The hashed area is what we're bringing in.
Yes.
Yes.
Where you said 9, those areas, that's already developed, isn't it?
No.
Where are those? Okay, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, all those are not.
Right. Basically, everything that goes from 13 all the way up to 28, if you wrap around that, those are the new lots that were platted.
You actually did a zoning change on those 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
Oh, okay. I just didn't see the lines. 13, 14, and 15. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, the small numbers are individual lots.
Right.
How they can access this?
We're going to take that cul-de-sac out,
I see the black line.
and this will be the road will tie back to here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's
And
unusual.
extend on down here.
We had to have some discussions with them on what exactly they were going to do. But yeah, they have that one access there, and then they also have an emergency access point on the east side from basically what used to be a golf cart path. This particular, all we need at this point from you with this abbreviated process, if you recommend to move forward, that's what's on your agenda for today, is to recommend to go ahead and move forward with it, and then we will then go through the actual steps and prepare the service plan and have that ready to go by the time the first public hearing is. That will be on your October 23rd agenda.
Will this take action?
The motion?
Oh, this one?
The public hearing, number
No,
5.
but
This is just a public hearing, a chance for
So no
people to come
motion.
comment.
And if you guys agree and tell us to move forward, we will move forward with the annexation process.
So there's already a building under number 13, but it's in the city, too.
That building is no longer there.
Okay.
Okay.
Kelly and his group have worked very hard to get this put together.
Yeah, it's a little complicated.
So you're just going to call for a public hearing, right?
Not to mention there's I still think there's a lawsuit going on out there about property ownership and who owns what and what. So it did get a little complicated. Not in this area, but along that drainage easement.
Not far from here.
Okay, so here we're just calling for a public hearing, no action.
Correct. Open the hearing, call for comment. When the comments received, or if there is none, close the public hearing, and Kelly will get the process going.
Okay.
Okay.
Item number 6, appointments, boards, and commissions. The Greenways Public Improvement District Board has 2 that are up. Both of these 2 are the developers' appointees. We have received the recommendation of Mr. Jim Schooler for 1 position, Mr. Shane Brooks for another. Again, both of those representing the developer.
Like who, Brooks?
Shane.
Oh, Shane. Okay. To replace these 2.
And the first one was what?
Jim's good.
Jim Schooler.
Jim Schooler.
Texas Panhandle Centers, Dr. Sam Reeves has occupied that position since the year 2000. Dr. Reeves is a tremendous participant in that. That board has asked that he be reappointed. He's willing to accept such if he chooses to reappoint.
Okay.
Good.
Consent agenda. Consent item A, purchase of heavy equipment, award to Axco and Roll. These are largely street department items that we need. All big yellow iron except for the trailer. Item B, award of the Farmers Avenue Stormwater Drainage Improvement Project. Project that was identified in the 2012-13 Capital Improvement Program budget for the drainage utility. And here's where it gets crazy. The city manager should not be allowed to operate a word processor by himself. The dollar amount's correct because I pay very close attention to such. The award is to Amarillo utility contractors. I'd love to claim this was a test to see who read the bid tab, but it won't be correct.
Amarillo.
West Texas Utility Contractors was not a bidder. That came off last week. Your amount, $4.479 million, is correct. Your bid tabulation is correct. Amarillo Utility Contractors is your low responsive bidder. Just as a quick reminder, this is a large project. We'll be putting 10-foot by 10-foot boxes under what will be the soon-to-be improved Farmers Avenue to begin moving the water that originates from Western Street west and western north for a pretty substantial district. This will drain a large part of that area of town. And if you think of the cubic volume that's in a culvert that big, it is tremendous. This does tie to very fortunate opportunities to take some money from your state of Texas, result in the eventual improvement of the first one-half arterial section on Farmers. Today that's strip paved with bar ditches. You'll now have all of your water in the ground. It will accommodate, as it moves farther to the east from western, it will accommodate the drainage from the soon-to-be developed portion of City View that tips north. And all of this will go into that large easement that you allowed us to purchase back in August. So the water's actually going to get turned and flowing north when it's finished.
Is it, you're given to understand that TxDOT's money is a limited time frame. If we don't use it now, we can't access it.
That is correct.
So it's important that we begin this.
Yes, sir.
Or we lose how much money?
Michael, make it up here yet?
It's about 1.7 million.
Okay.
And having the opportunity to use their money to do that first half section is very important. Even without that, we've got to get a hold of this water, get it moved, and then turn and go north. Today, if there's a lot of sheet flow, it overflows everything that we have out there. Takes off from several different surface ditches trying to get where it's going. Where it goes is a semi-improved playa lake that's back behind that western business park.
Well, we're leveraging our money with this
Yes.
TxDOT money, and that's important.
Okay, thanks. If someone would please make that correction when this consent agenda is called, I would appreciate it.
When I read it, I'll just go into more detail on that item and make that correction.
Good.
I read that at the same time.
That's not a motion.
Right.
No, but normally I just read that.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I'll read the next part of that one and do the correction.
Oh, I see. When you said that, I was looking on the detail sheets and I couldn't see where the issue was. Now I'm seeing it.
Right, no.
He can find where a comma goes.
Find the money, Brian.
The print is too large here.
All right.
And you're a detail guy, and that's no doubt.
I was looking at this detail. That was my problem.
What's wrong with that? If you're cutting on me, I want you to know detail.
Mayor, I'll move to item C if you'd like.
If I'm cutting on you, we've got other issues.
That's probably true.
We're definitely going to item C now.
Okay.
I know what comes next.
Okay.
Item C, the acceptance of your Women's Infants and Children, or WIC program grant. Small reduction. Don't really know why the WIC has decided to go to a set of 2 6-month contracts rather than 1 12-month contract. Despite this being a reduction from last year, as you'll recall, last year they gave us more money than we had ever had before. One of the only grant programs we've got that not only stayed funded but got more.
So if you took the half portion, it's still less.
Yeah, 3.5%.
Yeah, whichever way we look at it, it's about a 3.5% reduction. A little over 8,000 participants.
Is that the same in every area? You compare that to other areas that get this? Is it happening everywhere, that kind of reduction?
Other WIC programs from around the state? I don't know. I haven't answered that truly.
Yeah, that was an overall reduction.
And that's passed through from the feds, isn't it, a lot of it?
Comes from the USDA.
Yes, Department of Agriculture.
And historically, it's been a very sacred program.
It's only
When it
grown.
comes to funding, yeah.
It's only grown. And you know, we have an excellent group over there that's always standing with their hand out at the end of each year to take the money that they're recovering from other WIC programs. And we have made substantial improvements to that Austin Street facility. Late last year, we got money from another program and enclosed that old breezeway flyway. Not automated, but greatly enhanced their storage area. Put some equipment in, machinery in there that we didn't have. It's been recabled over the years. I mean,
We just finished the parking lot.
just at the parking lot. It's neat, but the traffic that goes through it is just
Tremendous.
amazing.
8,031 participants per month.
Yes. Item D, task order number 6, amendment. Amendment to your airport ticket level bridge project. This is the engineering contract, KSA Engineers. We are finishing that. As you all are aware, that bridge project did not get finished as quickly as it should, nor did it get finished within the contract period. As such, our engineers were on tap to do additional work beyond what they had been contracted to do. This trues that up. It's a $90,944 amendment, and just wanted to be very plain that the liquidated damages from the construction contract cover that. That does not come back out of our pocket.
I was wondering, as I read this, these two issues are really rather tied together with a margin of $5,000. What if the construction contract, what if they contest that on a legal basis? Is there any evidence they're going to do that?
There is no evidence that they will do that in this case. Not a surprise. They were notified quite some time ago. The 95-day period was actually a mutual agreement between the engineering firm, the airport department, and the contractor.
Okay.
So that's an excellent question. You do maintain a retainage on a construction contract that you would hold until such disagreements or disputes have been resolved.
Sure.
Fortunately, it's not money that's left, and we're asking for it back. It's still here.
Signage and everything is good. Is there any thought in the future when there's available funding to put something that indicates lights in the cell lot?
So there is, and in fact, we had an alternate when this project was originally awarded to put one of those called kids, light information display system boards in that cell phone parking lot. It was extremely expensive. Yeah. We still have the plans and the specifications for doing so. We're able to either get it in the local budget or through one of the FAA grants. We'd like to do that. That cell phone lot has been overly successful. There's times it's just packed.
Is that done with the lights, or is it it isn't a big screen? Is it? It's like inside. It's done with the lights like they do at DFW.
It looks to me like the old style alarm clocks.
Yeah. Okay. But it's still very, very expensive.
Very expensive.
Well, it may not be necessarily.
I think it would be a great improvement. It's just not something that's fit within available funding yet. The bridge project is well done at this point. The new signage at the airport, if you've had a chance to look at it, it's clean, crisp, it makes sense, it's logical.
And you don't have to slow down to 1 mile an hour to read it. I mean, it's plain.
Readable by the rocket.
Well, not quite that plain.
And it's pleasant to look at, like if you leave your car out there for a long period of time.
But it says do not
So
park.
you're looking for where they told you that.
Mayor, this is where we move to item E with your permission.
Good, let's go.
Where that was going also. Airport East Ramp Master Lease Agreement. Such agreement between the City of Amarillo and the Fauna Development Group. By way of reminder or introduction, the Fauna Development Group, this is the same group that we recently approved the Amarillo Economic Development Corporation project for. It was based on the purchase of land at Centerport and the construction of a facility for Lindsay Manufacturing. Representatives will be here today. I understand that project has gone so far, so fast, they're ready to break ground next
Tuesday, 8:30.
You have a draft of the lease agreement. There have been no changes. I do have some stuff I hope will kind of ease the pain of reading through all of those sheets. Each of you would take one of those. Kevin is. George, Dean, Dr. Matthews, whoever.
I didn't know that.
Kind of walk briefly through the term sheet, if we could, and then Marcus, myself, Dean, Mr. Rhodes have all worked on this over the last little bit. The property is as indicated on the second page, and you can see that map. The yellow area is the general subject. You've got the red boundary within, just what you're going to be looking at, and you have the option area. It includes not only that land in that option area, but the existing buildings within that area. Predominantly, those are those large hangars that we have out there, some of which are leased, some of which are not. One of which was subject to that recent engineering contract to get the roof put back on top of it. And of course, when it says the 20,000 square foot building, that is in that little toe, the boot that's to the bottom right. And it's the building that for some reason we all call the Colonial building, but that's the 20,000 square foot building. 40-year term. That is in accordance with, number one, compliance with our deed from the federal government. Number two, with the Texas Aviation Act, which is very prescriptive as to what we can and cannot do. It's a 40-year straight term. There's nothing in addition to such on top of that. Rent. The Prana Group has to guarantee us the current rent that we're receiving today. We generate a little over, just under $11,000. It nets just under $10,000 a month. That's what we're currently making. That's what they're guaranteeing you that you will continue to make. However, as they make improvements, you will receive 13% of the net gain in those rents. And the reason the net is important, for them to do much with most of these facilities, they have to put a lot of money in. So you allow them, we take the new rent, $2,000 a month, what it happens to be, minus the monthly cost of those improvements, and then we get 13% of the difference. They have to match the amortization schedules to their lease schedules. So when the amortization rolls off, i.e. if it's a 15-year amortization, if it's still under lease in year 16 or a new lease, you get 13% of the total. So you'll never drop below. You'll not add more capital into that area, and you'll receive 13% of whatever the benefit is that's being realized off that property. I think very important to this, and they were more than agreeing to do this, they've got to make positive change out there within 7 years. If they don't get to hold it for the next 33 just to see if something will happen. They've got to make a positive step. They've got to increase not only their bottom line but the cities. And they've got to do that within the 7 years, and that rolls. So we can't do one project in year 5 and then do none until year 45. Yeah. They have to continually do that. They take over the maintenance on any improvements, utilities, taxes, etc. We do propose in the lease to make available insurance on these properties through our carrier at their expense. If they choose not to do that or accept it, that's fine. They still have to provide the insurance. They're just having to secure it on their own. Why would we want to do that? We want the certainty that they're insured. We have a very good carrier, and we want to know that whether they're in the condition they are today or they've had millions of dollars invested in them, that if there is a disaster of any sorts, we'll be made 100% whole.
Do any of the current tenants, do any of their leases end in that 7-year period?
Probably. There's some of them that are out there, Pat, that are month to month as we speak.
Right.
So are the Paradise.
There's one that's a 5-year lease, and I think it has maybe 3 to go, and then another one that's month to month. And then a third one is the annual lease.
We're asking them to maintain the current monthly rent, but if those people withdraw or their lease ends, they don't have to.
They don't have to make up something that's not.
They don't have to try and go rent a quarterly and do that.
Correct.
Okay.
It'll still count against their
Nice.
7-year period. It'd be very nice. We do have some obligations under this lease. Asbestos survey work on what we call 2 wooden buildings, 5 hangars. We have to take down the 2 wooden buildings. If you'll look back on your map, and I guess look at the letter E in lease, come just across the red line and those 2 little rectangular black pieces. Those are old classroom buildings left over from the base. At one time there were many of them. There are only 2 left. We will have to take those 2 out. They're all wood, so there may be an opportunity for fun. They're entirely timbered structures.
Not far from practice fire range.
I think we're thinking alike here. Some reservations by the city. Of course, this only applies to that area that's identified. They cannot do anything in that area that interferes with the operations of the airport. They cannot use this to in any way infringe upon any further or future development we may choose to do on anything else out there. This is specific to that. They accept it with all the regulations and restrictions that go with it. They're well aware of those, and we'll have no problem working with them.
Is there a security fence that goes from that runway over there, or is that taxiway going to remain open as a part of the security area?
There's not an active taxiway over in that area. The ramp itself.
Right here?
That's closed.
Okay.
This right here is part of our perimeter road that we're required to keep, and we have to have that access. But this has been closed for 7 or 8 years.
If they bring in an aircraft type deal, is it possible to?
It's possible.
Because it wouldn't be constantly open. It would be. Yeah. Okay.
And I think that's been a consideration all along. Can you make a productive aviation-related reuse out of that big ramp area? The ramp's not in very good shape. Actually, horrible shape, probably be a more fair description. It's an opportunity to improve some stuff that I don't think we'll ever get to with our money.
That's great.
Just quickly, there are termination clauses in there. Of course, they don't pay the amounts that are due. You can terminate your lease. And again, they have the 7-year window in which they have to make things better both for them and us. And they do have that option to lease that land identified in that roughly triangular-shaped area. That would be at $10,000 a year plus, again, your 13% within that.
They hold that option for the whole time. If they get exercised, if we have somebody coming in, is it a first right of refusal, or how does that work?
It's a straight option. It's not worded as a first right of refusal.
So they just really control that area for.
You can always approach them to negotiate. It would be an option. We would hope a possibility.
Mayor, Commissioner, are there any questions that any of us could speak to or try to answer?
It's a great use for some property that may have never got used for 100 years.
Dean and I were out there 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
They're tremendous assets. They're assets that we've not really invested in or maintained since we took possession of them in the military. And they're at the point today that it'd be a large amount of money, but certainly much less than trying to replace them. You've got phenomenally large span-free structures that have just tremendous potential. But it's going to take somebody putting that money into them and stepping out to do that. And that's not really our mission or role or necessarily what we're good at. We've always used those airport funds for what we think of as traditional airport operations. This makes the best of both worlds. We have the opportunity to realize a benefit, and we're really not only going hands off, it's reducing our cost of keeping the area up and growing weeds and grass and trees. I think it's one of the better opportunities that we've come into for quite some time.
Well, I think you did a good job of summarizing a 25-page document into
Mr.
this so that
Summary
it's
right there.
understandable and it has the key points. Because, I mean, the document itself is very wordy and covers everything from A to Z.
We can write both words, long or short.
Well, this is good for people to ask questions. We have answers.
What a great opportunity.
The property we don't use.
Mayors, they will be here at your 5:30 meeting, I believe represented by James Fester. By James? I believe so. Item F, dedications and acceptances. We have a 50 square foot public right of way, very small one, at Broadway in Colorado for a water pressure monitoring device, and then a 10-foot water line easement. That one, I know I have had some questions. If you want, that's the second one behind tab F. And that's to service the enhancement of the existing business out there and cleans up what has been a private easement upon which we've got water lines and we just don't like it there.
That's ditch.
Mm-hmm. It also sets us up with a loop that we need and the ability to provide fire level service up and down that front road, which was missing. The service, for whatever reason, when that developed a long time ago, actually came from the west to the east through the private property and really limited our ability to grow out there.
Couldn't access it with trucks, could you?
Not only couldn't access it with the trucks, couldn't get the water we needed. The volumes.
Voice box. That's developed.
It is.
This is the name of his children. And
Blake and Bernay.
yeah. You were that vintage. Renee. Oh, Blake. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple of other items I'd like to discuss. First, any questions on the agenda?
Nope.
We have the second half of our also exciting municipal annexation policy discussion. Kelly's going to come up and get the computer ready to go.
I thought there were 4 parts.
You have all of the detail. His presentation is condensed into 2.
So this is a second half.
We have the second
I thought we were going to do this another couple of weeks.
He gave us this one last week.
As Kelly's getting ready, we've got several boards and commissions, some of them open session, some of them closed. One I'd like to bring to your attention is your photographic traffic signal enforcement committee, briefly known as the Red Light Committee. You've had a resignation from that. Of course, there was discussion, if you saw it in the paper on Channel 10. Staff has looked into that and reviewed it. There's a request to you from that committee for a little specificity in the charge or in what you would like to see come back from that group. I've taken the liberty of writing just a draft of a memorandum. Such follows the same format that this body did when we issued the charge to the full traffic commission as they looked at your potential cell phone texting bans. This is addressed to the chair. This committee already exists. It's addressed to the chair. It references the piece of the transportation code. Was so bold as to say you guys have reviewed this and you just think it's wonderful, but feel free to edit it. Those first two bullet points are the meat of it, and those are practically verbatim from the code that describes what that committee has to do, and then ultimately send back to you. So I would give you a moment to look at that and ask any questions or make any changes you would like to see.
Well, I think it's important to add that you're not doing this on your own. I think a few of us requested that we be able to do this, and we sort of reviewed this individually with you, talk about what our thoughts were. It's important that they have a scope for this.
I think that's pretty clear. What
And
they're supposed to be
I think the other topics that we're discussing, you can come back to the general committee if they want to make the agenda item. Should they not?
Yes, come
encouraged.
properly and appropriately back to the Traffic Commission.
For the whole commission's consideration.
For the whole Traffic Commission. I think there were good points raised about other elements of mobility. I think where we're needing to kind of clarify is this is specifically about the photographic traffic signals. The pedestrians, bicycles, there's good and valid issues, and those should go back to the Traffic Commission for review and discussion.
The whole commission.
And I've tried to style this such that
Well, as far as I
that's
go,
an option available to them.
they could have originated a month ago, 3 or 4 months ago, in the Traffic Commission.
Absolutely. Anytime
Those
soon.
extemporaneous items.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
It's good. I'd sure endorse the way this is stated.
We do need an appointee to that. If you'll recall, this committee, because it's created by the statute, is very unusual. That is Commissioner Escajeda's appointee. So if each of you has one, and each of you maintains the ownership of that one, as long as such committee shall live. So, Commissioner, if you'd like, we can visit here, or we can visit separately, and see if we can come up with a good name and push that toward the agenda
And while we
next week or week after.
We suggested people on our commission, it doesn't require that. Is that correct?
We suggested that those original 5 be drawn from the Traffic Commission because that's a group that's experienced and has a body of knowledge. I do not believe that you are limited to taking them from that.
Might be wise to do that. Might be it's the right person. I would suggest that if other...
You want that?
No. If I'll take the DAT off of it.
I think there's a comma that goes.
A couple of whole letters missing.
Are you sure it's not a participle?
If you look carefully, there's a dangling participle in there. But I'll try to find that before I take the DAT off of it.
So I would suggest that really it might take suggestions from people too, because we all kind of discussed in the first thing, well, who we would pick, and we had common choices so we could split it. But I think you should take suggestions, would you?
Oh, yeah.
If you got any.
Yeah, that's hardly what you all think I am.
How would you
want us
reign
to
with
think
counter
about it?
entrance?
Really, we can both get that. Many of us on the truth can get that.
Okay, thank you. The other boards, I think, are closed session items. Here is
Press.
Press. Can you give one to Kevin? No.
Got some more? Oh,
Broken management.
Give one for George.
Where and when.
You will read every
Well,
word.
this is straight to that. You got wine and how. More stuff?
I'm good.
No.
where, who, how?
Marcus, have we gotten a copy of these items? Have we actually seen those?
I can get them for you.
Are they real long?
No, they're not terribly long.
I'd actually like to see a copy of those.
Can do. Let me email it to you, or do you want a hard copy? Let me email it to you, or do you want a hard copy?
Something electronic would be highly appreciated.
Yeah, he prefers
Go to the chapter 43 division. I'll get you, I'll get you.
Or better yet, can you hold your tablet up against his tablet and boom, it's transferred.
You can't do that.
I know. See you on TV.
Let me, just real quick, let me explain to you. I see a lot of you looking at different things. I'd had along through the process, I had 4 different type presentations that I gave to various groups, and what you had handed out to you last week, the why and how, and then I just passed out the where and when. Those 2 presentations have kind of everything, all 4 of those others kind of combined. Because instead of doing 4 separate presentations, I kind of put things together so that we could do this in 2 presentations instead of 4. So there's not anything new. The formula I think you received a while back in your packets are just covered in these 2 presentations that we've been over last week and today.
I think we're all pleased with that.
Okay. In 87 words or less.
Okay. Like I said, we talked last week about why and how. We kind of talked about the growth boundary issues, and if we do think that there's an issue, and we all agree that it's important for a city's fiscal health or health of the growing city to look at your fiscal growth and your physical growth. How do you actually do it? And there are tools available to do it. Annexation being the primary one, and also you can do developer agreements. And that kind of leads me to this, that since that presentation, I've got quite a few phone calls, much more from citizens than the press, but I kind of wanted to reiterate that the title of this presentation is Growth Management and Annexation. It's not one and the same. Growth management does not necessarily mean annexation. It's just growth management is a larger issue that I think that we needed to look at here in the city. And then annexation being a tool that can be used, and one of the primary tools that can be used in doing that and looking at your growth management policies. So just because if we all agree at the end of the day that we do need to maybe look at amending our policy on annexation, then it doesn't necessarily mean that we're just going to go out and annex everything. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that we need to maybe implement some growth management tools. So we talked about the growth boundaries that have created. I still believe that this area right in here on this last picture really emphasizes some of the issues that we've seen pop up recently. The historical growth and annexation time frame where you see where most of our growth has been occurring has been in this area, and that's reflected in the little small pieces, if you will, piecemeal annexation that has been done over years that has been, again, sort of based on reaction to requests for annexation rather than looking long term. So today we're talking about, if we think it's something that we need to look at, where would we apply the use of these growth management tools that we talked about, and then when do you think we ought to implement those tools, and which tool when? So I really just want to start out with just some basic numbers, just strict numbers. The city of Amarillo population basically has grown by about 33,000 people over for the 20 years from 1990 to 2010. That falls right in line with what we've always said is Amarillo grows between 1% and 1.5% a year. It has forever. Of that population growth, about almost half of it has occurred within the northwest periphery, the southwest periphery, or the southeast periphery. And what I mean by that is, out in the Wampum, West Cliff area, that's the northwest periphery. Southwest would be those areas along Sauncey, the colonies, Sleepy Hollow, those areas. And then the southeast periphery would be those areas where Fox Ridge and Pheasant Run, just south of 58, there between Washington and Georgia, and then also the trade wind areas. Those are the areas that we call the southeast periphery. So if you look at the total population growth of the whole city, and then you actually just look at strictly the numbers of these census tracts that are in these peripheral areas, about 48% of the total growth has occurred in these areas. And getting even more specific about that, of that 48%, about 9% has occurred in the northwest periphery, about 16.8, almost 17% in the southwest periphery. And I think what's a little surprising when you look at it is about 22.4% of that growth between 1990 and 2000 population-wise was in the southeast periphery. So the southeast actually outpaced the southwest periphery as far as total population growth. And again, I'm just talking about those census tracts right on the periphery of the city limits in those areas. What does that mean? Basically, that means that over half of the growth in the city is occurring in those areas. There's two ways you can look at that. Yes, we are growing in those areas, but we're having a lot of population growth in other areas of the city also. This also doesn't necessarily mean that all this population growth is immigration, where people are moving in looking for homes. I mean, it can be immigration, and it can be new births. It could be people moving from one part of the city to another part of the city. But just strictly going by the numbers, what you see out there is what's happening, is that where most of the development is occurring are in the areas that are seeing some concentrated growth.
Are you dividing that based on what quadrants? How do you divide the quadrants? I-40, I-27, or is it geographic populations?
No, it's really not divided into quadrants. It's when I say the northwest periphery, we took the census tracts basically from Amarillo Boulevard northwest. I'm talking about this area right here.
Okay.
That's the northwest periphery, right around that city limits area. The southwest periphery is basically from 34th down to the Loop, or down to Hollywood. So I'm talking about this area right here, and that also includes the city area. Then the southeast quadrant really kind of does reflect one of the quadrants of the city, and that's basically from Georgia Street all the way back over here to the trade winds areas, and that's the southeast periphery.
So it is sort of divided by that canyon anyway.
You could say
it wasn't designed to, but it sort of is.
Right. There's some of the we didn't calculate any of the population numbers in these areas right here, or this area, right in here. But we looked at those areas that are right on the edge of the city in those three areas.
What about western edge right above I-40? That little green patch.
Right in here?
Where was that counted?
Yeah, that's all counted.
Is it counted north?
Yes, northwest.
Okay.
And so so given that, we also looked at where have the most recent annexations been, or from this time frame. So the brown areas that you see on this map are those areas that were annexed in the 1980s. The 1990, the blue areas, those are the areas that were annexed in the 90s, and then the green areas are the areas that were annexed in, since 2000. And by far, the majority of those have all been property owner requested. So the areas that are being requested to be annexed in order to get services, in order to be developed, are in those same areas that, that's what I say when you see almost half the city's growth occurring in these certain areas, the development trend reflects that as well. So, if we're growing 33,000 people, or if you boil it down, if we're growing about 1,700 to 1,900 people a year, how does that correlate into housing units, or how does that correlate to development? If you just the developments that we have on the books, basically ready to go in these areas, we have about 4,000. If the developments were built out, we have about 4,000 living units. And I'm talking about, say, for example, Redstone. Redstone, fully built out, has about 1,400 units planned for that subdivision. So if you look at all the build-outs of about 3 of the subdivisions, 4 subdivisions that we know really are ready to start developing at some point in time soon, we've got ample housing units that are available given our population growth. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we're not having a population explosion and thereby creating all this demand for new housing units that's not being met. I think Amarillo has always done a pretty good job of balancing the supply and demand of the housing units. But that's also to say, when we start looking at growth management and we start thinking about what areas do we need to protect for growth, I don't think it would be necessary to go out and, annex everything within 5 miles tomorrow in order to develop, because it's not going to happen. We've got plenty of developments on the books that are still developing, the colonies, the greenways, City View, vineyards. We've got plenty of developments even ongoing that will have plenty of housing units available to satisfy any demand, plus the ones that I just mentioned that are on the books so far that are wanting to start at some point in the near future.
Kelly, can I ask you a question? But and I understand exactly what you're saying, but then don't you leave yourself open to what we've experienced in South Town, where you have these islands pop up that are potentially very substandard? Right. I mean, isn't that the argument for going on and annexing more generally?
Well, it is, and that is the argument. But what I'm saying is we don't need to go out and annex everything within our ETJ and have to be ready for development with water and sewer, because there's just not going to be the demand there for actual development. So again, I think what we're talking about is actually looking at our annexation policy to use not only annexation but developer agreements. You can get another tool is development plat, where you can file a plat and attach development standards to the plat, just like you would have zoning ordinance, basically. There are tools that you can use for growth management that what we're trying to recommend is say, let's look at these areas, and especially those areas that we still have undeveloped land that are in the areas of these growth trends, and apply whatever growth management tool that might be appropriate in that area. It might be annexation, it might be a developer agreement, something like that. But as far as having to really, are we behind the 8 ball on capital improvements planning? Well, we are for some areas, but are we really behind the 8 ball in some of these farther reaching areas because we got to have development, we've got to have housing units? That's not the case. But we still are going to be recommending to go out and annex these areas, or look at these areas and decide if that's annexation is appropriate or some other tool.
Following what Dr. Reed is saying, I think it's really important when we consider the last 2 decades we've grown 17,000 roughly, 33,000. The demographics I've seen say 25,000 to 35,000 this next 10 years. If the number's 22,000, it's still dramatically higher. And if you look at this map and see the green, how much area of green there is compared to the other areas, I do think it's important if we think 2 decades ahead on this and preclude the things that we're running into south. Teach me what do you gain and what do you lose with property owners that are out there with property that doesn't quite fit what our standards are. They grandfathered in and we just go forward? Do you work around those people? Do we need to consider for that reason so we don't create more pockets of having to grow around them or include their...
Well, if you do annex already existing development, you are stuck with it. I mean, it is what it is. And at some point, you may be on the hook to provide water and sewer to those areas if they don't have a public distribution system already. So that is something that you need to worry about, and those would be some of the areas, just like that area south. I really just don't see us annexing or growing in that direction. I really don't. But if you get out ahead of the curve, like we're talking about, you would try to avoid those. Greyhawk Landing, if you know where that is.
Yeah.
This area right here. Greyhawk Landing, may or may not be. It's a pretty nice little development. It's got strip paved roads. The water and sewer here very shortly are going to be relatively ready, available. Once the loop is completed there along, the water loop along the Saucy and the Hollywood curve. That might be an area that you might look at, and there might be people out there that are experiencing difficulties getting water now. That's a common problem all outside the city of Amarillo. So that might be one area where it might make sense to go ahead and take that in. But some of those mobile home parks and those 1 acre developments that are directly south of town,
You can't.
I don't see
The
it.
same thing is true if you go, say out from the New Vineyards deal. There's an area that's a little more pristine. It doesn't have as many, but it doesn't have as many problems in the future. Should those be, and like around Greyhawk, should those be places we should say that's where we really should grow, that's where we should annex and put ourselves out a little forward so that we can have 8,000 more platted houses?
Yes, I think the answer is yes.
But how do we do that, and then we still got to think about the infill, because that's critical too.
That's true. Sounds like you got it.
There's your challenge. But I think we've all kind of committed, and I know this is something that's close to Commissioner Iscahida's heart. We've all kind of committed to trying to provide extra incentives for infill development. Have we not? It seems like that's what I've heard everybody say.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, okay.
But there's some also like these patches south of town that you have trouble working on, or you're helping or hurting. Same thing's true there. There's so many private ownership features in the infill areas, private ownership that may not want to, or may think there's some bird's nest on the ground in the future. It becomes hard to do that. Are you all studying how you do those?
Studying which properties to take in and which properties not to take in.
Well, let's say you even took the South Park area, or you took where Sinclair is considering his things out here. You took that area and said, what could be done there? Starting to study how many, because literally if we grow 25,000 people, if that's true, it's 8,000, 9,000 houses, it's 8,000, 9,000 jobs. Our job, I think, is to help accomplish that planning. And so how do you do that? And we know from the long-range plan we're going to have some outer development, but we've got to do something inside, too.
Well, I agree. And really that's part of the whole different discussion on what type of resources do you want to commit to that, and how do you do that. And there are different ways that you can provide incentives. It just depends on how you want to do it.
And how bad you want to do it.
And what you're willing to commit to.
Could we get a list of possibilities so we could study?
Sure.
About what other cities do and how they accomplish this? We can, at a future date, discuss that. It's a little separate from this, but...
Well, it's a good point that's related, and you get into the permutations, that go with that. When I think of infill, I think of an existing built neighborhood that either because they were never there or they've been taken out over the years. Well, Hilltop in North Heights. Fully built neighborhood, minus a few here and there, and then over the years, homes have been taken out, things have been cleaned. Looks like it's ready, prime for redevelopment. How then do you encourage or incentivize, and I would say in this case we're probably talking builders rather than developers, to come in and put those homes back and to do that. The project that was out on the east side of town, I wouldn't, to me that's not an infill project, it's just as important. It's existing, it's in the city limits, it's been in the city limits forever. It was platted, property was sold, property was resold just for decades, to the point that the challenge for it, I don't think, as a developer or a builder, is how do you deal with those ownership issues. And that's a new one for us. The gentleman that was working on that had some ideas, some of which I think we could have done, and told him so, but he still just kept hitting the brick wall of getting to that 50 plus 1 in any particular piece of that fractured ownership. We can gladly get a list of what's been done in other cities. I've talked to one, a very small town, that had a way of encouraging it that seemed to work. It was appropriately a smaller scale. To be successful long-term, we need to look at that as much as we need to look at the annexation policies or what the different tools are. But I think both of you have really hit on a key to the annexation discussion. And it goes back to what we said last week as a lead-in. Amarillo, the city, has never faced a boundary to its future before. And you do now. And they're not boundaries that will affect us tomorrow or in 5 years, maybe not in 10 years. But they're there and they'll stay there. You won't change it. You then consider the different tools to protect what doesn't have a boundary and how close do you want to get to where there are those boundaries to keep them from coming in on you. It's a very, y'all hit the nail on the head as to where this is.
It's growth management. But you take another area like 0506 Padlard out there, they developed those houses not far off of
just north of the loop.
Right. And those things have, talking to a neighbor, those things have been up and down and really sort of gone downhill pretty fast. I think there's things we need to think about how you develop the neighborhood to enhance it too, really.
Well, I think in some of those areas it's because there's a lack of retail businesses in those areas, and they have to go so far to get any services. And I'm thinking about Osage, south of 34th Street. I mean, I know you all know there's terrific traffic on that road now. I mean, between on Osage in the mornings, you can't get across that street. And of course, it's not too far out where they're not in the city limits. And some of them really nice homes out that way. I mean, people have really spent some money on some of those homes and all that, but, they're haphazard everywhere. And so I think, we have to take a big look at how we deal with this issue, because then we're going to get the complaint, well, there was plenty of vacant land in whatever neighborhood there is, and, we should have considered doing some infill like we've talked about. So I think we have a balanced job to do here, just to make sure we hit all the nails on the head.
You've hit the hardest point, though, and that is where you start to say, well, we need some retail out here. We really are almost powerless to have it.
You were there. You might have been there whenever we had the town hall meeting.
Piggly Wiggly.
In Southeast Amarillo. There's a woman that was
Piggly Wiggly.
plenty hot because they closed the Piggly Wiggly store. It closed 28 years
Well, she couldn't go buy thread anywhere because there wasn't any place in North Amarillo to go buy a spool thread.
But let's go back to
density is what will drive.
Yes.
It's just like no
Density,
magic bullet beyond
rooftops.
Well, that's beyond our control.
But again, managed, because maybe Pavlard is a little too far out to encourage you to do that part closer in and really connect things. We're talking about connectivity and connection.
But with trade wind, just look at trade winds. You start that and then look at the retail that's just popped up right there at 34th and Osage there. If you look at that map behind you, I mean, it really jumps out to me that area between the loop and the city on the southeast part of town, I think that's a real key area that, like you're saying, you're starting to see some little development in there, and I think that's a really key area to look at very quickly.
Yeah, but it takes some really comprehensive thought. I was out there with a person the other day and looking at some drainage issues that weren't handled by the developer. It's horrible. It's going to cost us a lot of money to do it. Big, where these zoning things are there. We see it on Fairway Boulevard. How there isn't a sidewalk there. All those things, we've got to stick to our guns on these things and have rules that others can't look away from. Now we're faced with a lot of expense, and yet it's a safety issue. It's an issue that the populace wants out there. It's a health issue with West Nile. Out there where I was walking the ditch by 47th Street, 46, whatever that is there. And there's just a lot of little issues. It really takes a comprehensive look for you to do what. It's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for all of us.
And you correctly led us into what I think is the next step. It's what Kelly's group's already working on, and that's your development policy.
I agree. It's to really look at the standards.
Referencing are correct and proper in terms of the rules that were in place at the time.
Yeah.
And therefore should we begin an examination of such, and that's called for in the comp plan. And we're on that next.
So basically going from this map, showing you where the growth trends are, both development and population-wise. As part of one of our growth management tools, we're recommending that we specifically create a growth area map where we identify the areas where there's adequate infrastructure, it's already there, and you can't have that infill and those kinds of things. Also, identify the areas on the periphery that either already do have the necessary infrastructure there, or it's easily available or easily extendable in the vicinity, basically, and that makes sense to go ahead and annex and service. Those areas is what we would call the growth areas. That's a near-term thing that given the growth pressure, the efficiency of being able to provide service relatively soon, that's something that we ought to look at in the short term. Thirdly, identify those areas that really cannot be efficiently served. Those are the areas that are maybe further out where you really don't expect significant population growth or development in the next 15, 20 years, something like that, but are in those areas that you are trending towards, and those are the areas that you want to try to do something, whatever is appropriate, to protect those areas for that future growth. And we would call those the reserve areas. And then along with that, tractor building permits, tractor population statistics, and really try to have some numbers to back up what your proposals are, what your strategies are, and when you put all that together, you could have that be a part of a growth management policy. But what all kicks it into play, or what all backs it, is I think the actual annexation policy that is what we're recommending to change. You have these tools that you can associate with this policy change, that being, your annexation policies, your development agreements, your growth area map, but it's all backed with the actual policy. And all this is, in our development policy manual right now, Section 19 is annexations. And annexation, that specific part of the policy right now just has a kind of a definition of what annexation is, and then it literally has a section that says Amarillo's annexation philosophy. And in one of your previous PowerPoints, I pointed out what it actually says, and it basically says that the City of Amarillo will annex upon the request of a property owner, that kind of thing. There's several more pages in that policy, but it covers the technical aspects about the annexation plan requirements that we talked about. We decided to say our annexation plan is to not have an annexation plan. We will not annex any tract that has more than 100 houses. It goes through all the technical things that we went over last time. So really, it really is this simple. That stuff is still pertinent today. What we're recommending is just to make this one change in the annexation policy to put in a purpose statement. And the very top of this is basically a definition of what annexation is, and then this to add this purpose statement, and I've highlighted in red kind of the key things that we're trying to get across, that according to our city comprehensive plan, we went through a very public process that was discussed and recommended and agreed upon, and the municipality has a responsibility to its residents and taxpayers to ensure a growth pattern that makes good fiscal sense to the city. Critical in addressing a city's growth is a comprehensive annexation policy, which has long-range and coordinated annexation strategies that directly impact development patterns. And then we specifically list some of those strategies include advanced annexation of key growth areas or areas intended for limited development. Inclusion of conditions in development agreements. So we're talking about those growth management tools, but we actually list as our purpose why we're wanting to do this, and then we list the management tools that we would implement to do this with.
Kelly, is there a process that's available to us under state law, I would say, whereby you can identify an area and it's within our, I know it has to be within our ETJ, not to annex it right now and not have hard, solid plans to do it, but say we will be annexing this in the future, therefore it must comply with this set of standards.
Two ways you can do that. Yes, you can do that. And you can do that by a developer agreement for any number of years, or you can do it by a development plan. You can do it that way also.
By development plat, is that?
A development plat. It's a plat that has development standards on the plat.
So you know sort of how it's going to be zoned?
Yes, it actually you can do land uses, you can do those kinds of things with a development plan.
Well, what is the incentive for a developer though to tie his long-term plans up when he has no benefit by public safety or drainage or?
If I'm a buyer,
yes,
that entices me. Oh, eventually these are the standards. We're going to be city quality. But I won't have to pay city taxes for 20 years to come, or whatever.
And it's got to be the right buyer, developer. You're buying protection.
Yeah.
You're also saying we're not going to annex you for this period of time.
But you've got to have the developer really much control a large property area to do that. Individual owners are within that boundary. How do they deal with that?
Probably in many cases not as great a benefit to those individual tracts. If there's a benefit to that tract, it would need to be more immediate rather than long term. And if you have one of those and you've built a nice home, you have your little ranchette.
Yeah.
And I own the 5 acres next to you. Today, if I chose to, I could go put 5 manufactured homes on it. Right up against your fence.
Gotcha.
And you could decide if that was...
Or a feedlot.
Or something akin to a feedlot, a hobby farm.
But that's true. I've gotten calls from several property owners wondering if, between the layer development down there, wanting to know, can Canyon come in? Because you go out there for a particular reason, and you build out there for that reason, and then along comes somebody right next door that you'd rather not be living next to that land use, and they would like the protection of land use regulations. The county, I don't think, is ever going to have that, and this would be something that would be beneficial for them in that regard.
Could you accomplish what Jim's talking about? Let's say you're out here somewhere and you say, well, we're going to look at this, and let's say you counted 40 little ranchettes or whatever out there. Is there some way you can take care of the other area and promise what's to come, and not
officially annexing?
Well, no, yeah, and not limit or hurt the others, sort of give them an oasis or their own little ranchette, or that doesn't work.
You can't always have your cake and eat it too, Mayor. That's been the problem that got us into this. We've tried to be conservative in our annexation. We haven't used hardly any of the tools available to us. And at some point, it's a policy decision as Kelly's described, a very methodical, careful analysis of where you want to direct growth. In all the talk I've been sensing here, and everybody's envisioning, is residential areas. But remember, part of your good land use planning, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, is you also want to allow for new commercial areas, perhaps a new industrial area for those jobs that will be coming that we want to attract. I think an interesting exercise, I used to live in San Antonio, and you may be familiar with that city. They did a poor job of this years ago. And today, it's not unincorporated areas, it's incorporated areas. You'll be driving through San Antonio and it says leaving San Antonio city limits, entering Balcones Heights. And you'll drive a few blocks, it says leaving Balcones Heights, re-entering San Antonio. And when you look at the annexation map, what they did, they found an alley, almost literally, where they could annex a piece of the city around that little town, that village, and then you're back into San Antonio. And you're going up the road, and here's the next suburb, Universal City. It's a couple of miles, but here's a strip that they were able to annex, and you're back into San Antonio. If we don't apply some wisdom, our future generations, it won't happen in our lifetime, but they're going to be faced with pockets of unincorporated areas, and maybe some new towns will ask to be incorporated within our ETJ. That requires our permission, another whole issue. But you can look at the cities of Texas and see the ones who thought far ahead on their annexation and growth management policies by looking at the cohesiveness of their city limits versus those such as one of our big sisters down south that is very checkerboard when you look at a detailed map of the San Antonio city limits.
If your proposed plan ends up looking like a voting map,
yeah, you've got problems. It's not a plan.
It's good enough work, and that's what you find. Now, Mayor, to build onto that and on Marcus's response, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. That's correct. There are tools still available yet that we don't have. Part of them are referenced in the comprehensive plan again. Things like creating different zoning districts that encouraged and allowed a development that looked like, say Greyhawk looks today. Allows that rural character and most of the benefits that folks have gone to the rural areas to get within your corporate boundaries. We don't have that today, but it's...
So you could allow a development of source that 3 acres is...
You can do paving. Yeah, you can authorize strip paving in some of your neighborhoods with certain conditions.
We want to have a development of 3 5-acre lots, and that doesn't necessarily seem appropriate to require sidewalks, curb and gutter, and alley.
Sure.
Something like that. So they go outside the city for that.
But you could have that and then go back to strict curb and gutter and all that another mile down the road, but not have that universal city type problem.
Sure.
Here.
We don't have it today. It's an option available to us if we want to pick that up.
Knowing how much
look at it.
Yeah, I think knowing how much we are going to grow, we either do it well or we just piecemeal through it. I really think this commission would like to see us start to lay some groundwork so there's some guidance for it. And we've already done it with the comprehensive plan for the citizens. I think we look at how, Rodney, what do you think?
Well, I think that's right. We decided to go down this road during the comprehensive plan, and now we just implement it.
Yeah.
So I think we're already committed to that.
I think what we're looking at, right off the bat is, this immediate growth planning map is to address the near-term areas that we know right now have growth pressures on them that can be served efficiently. And then, what this would reflect also is identify those areas that we think today really need to be looked at to have some sort of growth management tool applied to that area. And what this involves is actually a detailed process to look at each, what are the properties, how is it developed currently, what is the property, and you get with the property owner and you start those discussions. But these are the areas that we need to start on looking at and doing something with. And so this will change from year to year, or it could stay the same, but I expect this to change from year to year. But at first glance, this is what we recommend to use to guide us right now. Another thing to look at is with these tools, there's some requirements as far as what's contiguous to what. You can't just reach out and annex something unless it's contiguous on 2 sides, if it's less than 1,000 feet, and those kinds of things. It's interesting that if you do a developer agreement, it acts just like ETJ. you can then expand your ETJ off of a developer agreement, so once you start implementing these tools, not only does it help you with those areas, but it again expands your ETJ so that you do have some say in what goes on beyond those ones. So it's kind of you start with this, and then as a result of this, it has things that occur afterwards that help you expand those areas of regulations. So
That map's different than what we have in this folder.
It's the next one. It's on. It's another one or two over.
Go to the next to the last page.
I got it, but it was different than that map. Because this doesn't have the brown areas.
yeah,
It doesn't have the 90, 80.
right. That was just a growth trend there to show you where the
Very last page
That's the,
of the packet.
Oh,
Very last page.
Did like I did, you flipped over and started back into it.
There you go. That should be the same.
but it leaves out that brown area. Why is that?
Well, that one slide was just, or that one is just to show you the trends of the annexations.
That was a by-decade chart.
Okay. It's a different scale.
And so what this map would be is the growth planning map that shows those areas that we feel we need to look at immediately as growth areas that we probably need to look at annexing and providing services for and planning for those services, and then reserve areas to start taking a look at a more longer-term approach on which growth management tool would be best applied for those areas, but recognizing that those areas need to be addressed.
I think you're right on target.
I think you move forward and all what you need to do to create.
As long as we have the caveat that we are not just going to concentrate these outside areas, that we're going to figure out the path to incentives.
Comprehensive.
The path to incentives in our current area.
And good point. If you want to proceed with modifying our annexation policy, we'll be glad to set that in place and to get it moving. And for our purposes, we want to be very clear that changing our annexation policy, start that next week after, that's not the same as us saying, I'm annexing this and I'm annexing that. We're not starting an annexation. We are revising and implementing a comprehensive annexation policy. Then Kelly and your Planning and Zoning Commission and others will go to work, presuming that gets approved and put in place.
And if a person came to town and said, what's going to happen in this area, we would show them that.
And I think you owe it to people that want to come to town that are already in town. And, okay, what city are you going to be doing in 5 and 10?
Yep. Well, and not just to the citizens, through the school districts too, who are planning with that. And you talked about commercial development. We know what TxDOT intends to do with the southeast loop. So obviously there's an incentive to do commercial development around there that's with limited access, which we didn't do in Sonsi, and now we could do that there for the next 40, 50 years.
It's a fair question of stewardship for citizens and others to ask the city and receive a good answer of how are you going to grow in the next 25, 30 years. When we invite a company to come here like a Bell Helicopter, we ask them that question. We expect them to be able to tell us what is your growth plan, how are you going to develop. And it's a healthy question for a city to ask.
Once we get, I'm sorry.
Well, the developers that sat down here around the table, they all said, we can't market this land if we don't. I mean, we could market it for the wrong reason and mislead people. We don't want to do that. It's just, excuse me.
Well, I was just saying, once you get started, how do we inform the public and, and our constituents, developers, builders and so forth, so that they have some maybe input or, they're part of the process, so that we don't meet with a lot of resistance when we come out and say, well, we're going to implement this plan, after all the studies and everything else. So are we going to do something to make sure that we get the word out?
Well, yeah. Currently, what if we approve this change in policy, then our job from that point forward is we're already in discussions with the developers, and everybody is kind of on the same page, especially those areas that we we targeted as growth areas. Everybody's well aware of that. But then, as far as citizenry, we've gone through a big public meeting process here, but it's our job to contact property owners that are in these areas and talk with them and say and explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and really start looking at the specifics of each of those properties and trying to find out, number one, by discussion with them, what's the best thing to do. Try to explain to them what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And did you have any plans?
Has surveyed,
for the future?
surveyed.
Right.
Options that are.
Well, and they need to understand that we aren't out here. This isn't like some eminent domain deal. It's nothing like that. That it's simply a planning tool so they and we can plan together.
I can guarantee you that you'll never get a call from a citizen that says, hey, I just understood the city's initiated annexation of my property and I didn't know about it. That won't happen. But last thing I'll say is everything that you said was right on target, but also it's very important to remember that this really helps internally also with the planning for your capital improvements. That if everybody's on the same page of where we're looking at and what we're doing with the limited resources that we have available for infrastructure, it helps us as well plan for the future and what we're doing instead of that reacting where when we sounds great, but we don't have the money to do that right now.
The only thing I'd draw to finish that comment is that this doesn't put an extra penny in the bank either.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That is
Amen.
I mean, it doesn't. It's a plan, but it doesn't add anything to the tax rolls at all. It's just a plan.
The city never has annexed for revenue and really never will. I know a lot of cities got a bad rap for doing that, but we've never done it, and that's not the intent of what we're talking about at all.
Right.
Thank you, Gary.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, we have just a few brief minutes before we go to the 5:30 meeting. If we could, we'll jump into a quick closed session.
Commissioner, call a closed session.